clear, Mayday, Pakistan 8303.
Pakistan 8303, roger sir, both runways available to land.
This passenger aircraft was only 600 feet above Pakistan's largest city when the pilot issued a Mayday call. It was 2:35 p.m., and with everyone locked in their homes, due to the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, no one was expecting an emergency. Shortly after the distress signal, Pakistan International Airlines flight PK-8303 crashed into a residential area just 1,340 meters from the airport runway. And surprisingly, initial investigation reports indicated that the plane itself had no technical faults. So, how did this incident occur? What was the conversation between the pilot and the air traffic controller before the crash? Why did the first landing attempt fail? And what did the investigation team discover after 3 years of intense scrutiny? On May 22, 2020, PIA flight PK-8303 departed from Lahore at 1:05 p.m., bound for Karachi International Airport. The flight was scheduled to last 1 hour and 45 minutes. At the time, COVID-19 lockdowns were in effect, resulting in fewer flights and high passenger demand due to the upcoming Eid holidays. Consequently, the flight was fully occupied, carrying 91 passengers and 8 crew members. The pilot in command was 58-year-old Captain Sajjad Gul. The first officer was 33-year-old Usman Azam. The aircraft was a 16-year-old Airbus A320 equipped with 2 CFM56 turbofan engines. It was in excellent condition and maintained according to Airbus's recommendations. After takeoff, the flight reached its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet, where it remained for the next 45 minutes. During this time, both pilots were offered snacks, but they declined due to fasting. At 1:24 p.m., while the plane was passing over Nawabshah, Lahore ATC connected the flight with the Karachi control tower. The ATC welcomed the pilots and instructed them to proceed to Makli. Typically, aircraft on this route confirm their flight path with Karachi ATC, as there are several routes from Nawabshah to Karachi, including Nawabshah 2A, Nawabshah 2B, and Nawabshah 1C. These routes are pre-programmed into the flight management system, allowing pilots to select the assigned path on the screen. The autopilot system then adjusts the aircraft's altitude and speed accordingly. The flight was initially assigned the Nawabshah 2A path, which was a longer route. The pilot persuaded the air traffic controller to provide a shorter route, and permission was granted to fly directly to Makli due to reduced traffic during the pandemic. However, the pilots forgot to update the flight management system with the new route, causing the computer to calculate altitude and speed based on the 2A path while the plane was actually flying through 1C. If the path is longer, the plane descends more slowly. If it's shorter, the descent is faster. Because the flight computer was set to the 2A path, the aircraft's descent rate was 1,000 feet per minute, but it was on the 1C path, which required a faster descent. As a result, the plane, which should have been at 7,000 feet at the Makli waypoint, was still at 10,000 feet. When the air traffic controller at Karachi Airport noticed that flight was at a higher altitude than expected, he advised the captain to orbit around Makli to reduce the aircraft's speed and altitude. However, the captain refused the suggestion. By this point, the pilots had not realized that the flight management system was set to the 2A path while they were actually on the 1C path. To reduce the altitude, the captain lowered the plane's nose, causing the altitude to decrease by 2,400 feet per minute and rapidly increasing the plane's speed. Within moments, the plane was only 21 kilometers, 15 nautical miles, from the runway, with its altitude reduced to 6,000 feet. According to flight protocols, the plane should have been at 3,000 feet at this point. The air traffic controller attempted to contact the pilot, but the pilot mistakenly changed the radio frequency. The ATC then reached the pilot through the emergency channel, informing them that they were at 6,000 feet when they should have been at 3,000 feet, and advised them again to orbit to manage speed and altitude. The captain rejected this advice, stating they had established on the runway and would make it. At this moment, the captain told the first officer that after landing, everyone would be surprised. This conversation was recorded in the cockpit recorder, and the air traffic controller also heard it and requested them again to orbit, but the captain denied it once more. Shortly after, the captain realized their mistake. The selected path on the FMS was incorrect. The cockpit recording captured both pilots saying, Oh, how did this happen? Hold on, remove your hold. The first officer then handed full control to Captain Sajjad. Up to this point, the flight was being operated by the first officer, while the captain was supposed to ensure compliance with protocols. Unaware that the first officer hadn't lowered the landing gears, PK-8303 was now descending rapidly due to its nose-down position, reaching speeds over 650 kilometers per hour, triggering warning alarms in the cockpit. As the flight neared the ground, a second warning alarm sounded, indicating that the landing gears had not been deployed. At this point, the first officer panicked and requested the captain to take an orbit to help control the speed and altitude. But the captain denied the request. As the plane approached the runway, multiple warning alarms were ringing inside the cockpit, including an excessive speed alarm. The captain, confused, landed the plane without deploying the landing gears. The plane hit the ground 4 times in 16 seconds, causing both engines to scrape the runway and one engine to fail on the spot, leading to an oil leak. At this moment, the captain realized he had made a terrible mistake. During the chaos, the first officer shouted, "Sir, take off, sir, take off!" In a panic, the captain pulled the takeoff lever, lifting the plane back into the air with only one engine barely functioning. According to experts, the pilots should have left the aircraft on the runway instead of attempting to take off again. The worst-case scenario would have been the engines catching fire, which could have been managed by the airport's emergency services and quick response teams. Now, the aircraft was at an altitude of 3,000 feet, with one engine working and the other one on fire, and they were attempting to return to the runway after circling the airport. The control tower informed the captain that all runways were free and he could land on any of them. During this conversation, the second engine began to vibrate and shut down mid-air. The plane was now heading towards the runway, with both engines out of order, and the altitude was dropping rapidly. This time, the captain engaged the landing gears early, causing drag and further reducing speed, which was their only hope. The pilot aligned the plane to the runway at an altitude of 600 feet. Realizing they would not be able to reach the runway, the captain issued a mayday call. A few seconds later, at 2:45 p.m., and only 1,340 meters from the runway, PIA Flight 8303 crashed into a residential area of Model Colony. The blast from the crash was heard miles away. Of the 99 passengers, including crew members, only 2 survived the accident, and 1 person on the ground died. Emergency services reached the crash site quickly, but faced challenges due to the narrow streets. According to the investigation, several factors contributed to this tragic outcome. The primary responsibility for this accident falls on the flight captain, who repeatedly ignored flight protocols and air traffic controller instructions. The air traffic controller also erred by not informing the pilots about the landing gear. If the landing gear had been deployed initially, this disaster might have been avoided. Additionally, both pilots were fasting and had not eaten for the last 7-8 hours, which later led to a ban on flying while fasting. This tragic incident underscores the importance of thorough checks and clear communication between pilots and air traffic control, as well as the need for prompt emergency response procedures. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this tragic event. Share your comments below, and if you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content. Thank you for watching.